Good morning, class 9. Now, today, let's take the story of Ruskin Bond, A Face in the Dark. Fine? So, let's go through the introduction of the author. Who was Ruskin Bond? Ruskin Bond was an Indian author of British descent. Is a prolific means होता है productive, fruitful. Prolific writer whose works are popular with adults and children alike. I think children, I hope that you know Ruskin Bond. He lives in Missouri. And he wrote many good stories for children as well as for adults. You might have read his stories in your junior classes also. In the following story, writer Ruskin Bond relates a thrilling incident set among the picturesque hills around Shimla. What is there in the story? He has given a thrilling, exciting, a horrifying incident that took place in the picturesque views around Shimla. Ruskin Bond's fascination with the paranormal something related to the ghosts, spirits, fine, that is known as paranormal. Ruskin Bond's fascination with the paranormal finds expressions in this macabre tale. Macabre means ghastly, horrifying. Clear? So, the main character in the story is Mr. Oliver, who was a school teacher. One day, he was on his way back to school late one night when he meets a strange young boy. Clear? And this encounter, this meeting fills him with terror and he starts running. He takes to his heels only to discover that there is no escape for him. He ran away from that boy, but he found that he could not escape from that situation because he met another man who was like the young boy. Ruskin Bonds makes skillful use of all the elements of the horror story: fear, surprise, suspense, and mystery to explore humanity's collective fascination with the dark. So now let's start the story. Okay, as already I told you that the central character of the story is Mr. Oliver, who was a teacher who taught in the school in Shimla. Fine, so let's see. Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher, was returning to his school late one night on the outskirts of the hill station of Shimla. So now Mr. Oliver, he was an Anglo-Indian teacher who taught in a boarding school. That was a boys' boarding school. He taught in that school, and the school was situated in the outskirts of Shimla. Right? So one night, Mr. Oliver was returning back from the market to his school. Clear? The school that was situated on the outskirts of Shimla. From before Kipling's time, the school had been run on the English public school line. So children, you will underline this. The school had been run on English public school line. It was an English public school from the very old time. It was running on the English school public lines. It was a boys boarding school, clear, and most of the boys was from the wealthy Indian families. The rich boys studied there in that school. And what other specialties? They wore blazers, caps, and ties. Fine. So when we describe his school, what we'll write? That the school was the boys' boarding school situated at the outskirts of Shimla. Most of the boys were from the wealthy Indian families, and they wore blazers, caps, and ties. The school was running on the lines of the English public schools proper. Fine. Life magazine, in feature on India, had once called it the Eton of the East. Clear? Eton of the East. Now, Life magazine, it was a magazine published in England. It has once called the school the Eton of the East. Eton was a very famous college in England. Clear? So this school was called the Eton of the East, the school where Mr. Oliver taught. Mr. Oliver had been teaching in the school for several years. Fine. Now, let's see. The Shimla Bazaar, with its cinema and restaurants, was about 3 miles from the school. Now, the bazaar, the main bazaar of Shimla, it was situated 3 miles away from the school. Fine. And Mr. Oliver, a bachelor, usually stroll means walked in a leisure manner. जैसे walk में जाते हैं ना धीरे धीरे आराम से, that is called strolled. Mr. Oliver, a bachelor, usually strolled into the town in the evening, returning after dark, when he would take a shortcut through the pine forest. Now it was the usual routine of Mr. Oliver. Every day in the evening, he go for a walk to the market 3 miles away from his school, and he return after dark. And generally he take a shortcut that cut through a pine forest. Right? This was his usual routine. Now, here children, just watch carefully this paragraph, third paragraph. Here the writer has created a horrifying atmosphere. Clear? He's trying to create a feeling of suspense, mystery, fear. Fine. When there was a strong wind, the pine trees made sad, eerie sound that kept most people out to the main road. Now, when there was a strong wind, जब भी हवा बहुत तेज चलती थी, तूफान आता था, the pine tree made sad, eerie means होता है strange, mysterious. The pine trees made sad, eerie sound that kept most people to the main road, and because of that sad, strange sound, many people do not take that shortcut because they are afraid. Clear? But Mr. Oliver was not a nervous or imaginative man. Keep this line in your mind. Mr. Oliver was not a nervous or imaginative man. But Mr. Oliver was not a nervous, he was not an imaginative man. He was not afraid. He carried a torch. He was having a torch with him, and it gleams. The batteries were running down, moved fitfully down the narrow forest path, and its light, gleamy shine, and its light, it moved fitfully. Fitfully means feverishly. कभी बंद हो रही है, कभी जल रही है, ठीक है ना? For a short time, it moved fitfully down the narrow forest path. And why the gleam was moving fitfully? Because the batteries were running down. Torch के जो batteries थे क्या हो गए थे? खत्म हो गए थे, run down हो गए थे. Fine. When its flickering light fell in the figure of a boy who was sitting alone on a rock, Mr. Oliver stopped. Now that day, what happened? Suddenly, when its flickering light shining in an unsteady manner, jalti hui, bushti hui. So when the flickering light of the torch, it fell on a boy who was sitting alone on a rock, Mr. Oliver stopped. Why? Because he thought that he was one of the boy of his schools. Boys were not supposed to be out after dark, and it was the rule of the school that after dark the boys are not allowed to come out of the hostel. So Mr. Oliver, when he saw that boy sitting over here, he thought that he was a boy of his school. He stopped over there. "What are you doing out here, boy?" asked Mr. Oliver sharply, moving closer so that he could recognize the miscreant. Miscreant means mischievous person. Clear? Shararti jisko bolte hain. So Mr. Oliver sharply, angrily, he got angry. Why? Because this boy is breaking the rule. Fine. He is out after dark. So sharply, angrily, he asked, "What are you doing here?" And he moved closer to the boy so that he can have a better view of him and he could recognize the boy. But even as he approached the boy, Mr. Oliver sensed that something was wrong. Underline it. Mr. Oliver sensed that something was wrong. But even as he came closer to the boy, he felt something mysterious. He felt that something was very wrong. The boy appeared to be crying. What the boy was doing? He was crying. His head hung down to be held, his face in his hand. He held his face in his hands, and his body shook convulsively. Convulsively means moved suddenly with jerks. Fine. So the boy, his head was hung down. He held his face in his hand, and his voice was shaking fitfully. ठीक है ना? It was a strange, yes, underline this. Again, it gives the feeling of suspense, mystery. It was a strange, soundless weeping, and Mr. Oliver felt distinctly uneasy. It was a strange, soundless weeping, and Mr. Oliver, he felt clearly uneasy. Clear? He felt something mysterious over there. Got it? So, children, what you do is okay, let's finish it. Well, what is the matter? He asked, his anger giving way to concern. So, Mr. Oliver, when he went near to the boy, he saw that the boy was crying. His anger was changed into the concern now. He showed his concern for the boy. He asked, now what is the matter? What are you crying for? The boy would not answer or look up. His body continued to be racked with silent sobbing, but the boy, neither he looked up nor he answered Mr. Oliver's question. His body still, he was still sobbing. His body was moving, clear, shaking convulsively still. Come on, boy, you shouldn't be out here at this hour. Tell me the trouble. Look up. So the Mr. Oliver was trying to console that boy. He said, come on, boy, you shouldn't be out at this time of the night. Tell me, what is your problem? Look up. The boy looked up. He took his hands from his face and looked up as his teacher. So at his request, the boy looked up. He removed his hand from his face. He looked at his teacher. The light from Mr. Oliver's torch fell on the boy's face, if you could call it a face. Now the light from the torch of Mr. Oliver, it fell on the face of the boy only if you could call it a face. It had no eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. The face of the boy was having no feature. Neither it is having the eyes, nor ears, nor nose, nor mouth. It was just a round, smooth head with a school cap on top of it. And that's where the story should end. But for Mr. Oliver, it did not end here. The boy's face was blank. No features was there, only just a school cap on the top of his head. And the story should end here, but for Mr. Oliver, it did not end here. The torch fell from his trembling hand. Mr. Oliver was extremely afraid, scared. The torch fell from his trembling hands. He turned and scrambled down the path, running blindly through the trees and calling for help. He turned, he scrambled, he moved with pace. He started running blindly through the trees and calling for help. He was still running towards the school building when he saw a lantern swinging in the middle of the path. He was still running towards the school. Suddenly he saw a lantern that was swinging in the middle of the path. Mr. Oliver stumbled up to the watchman. एकदम watchman से टकराए. Gasping for breath, what is it, Sahib? Asked the watchman. Has there been an accident? Why are you running? So it was a guard, Chaukidar, watchman. He asked, what happened, Sahib? Why are you running? Had there been an accident? Have you seen some accident? I saw something horrible. A boy weeping in the forest and he had no face. Now Mr. Oliver, because he was panting, half there, he said, I saw something very horrible. A boy is weeping in the forest and he's having no face. No face, Sahib? The watchman asked, Sahib, no face? No eyes, nose, mouth, nothing. Mr. Oliver was explaining. Nose and nothing. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, nothing was there on his face. Do you mean it was like this, Sahib? Asked the watchman and raised the lamp to his own face. So what the watchman did? He raised the lamp to his own face and he asked Mr. Oliver, Sir, do you mean it was like this? ने कहा आपका मतलब उसका चेहरा ऐसा था? The watchman had no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. Even the watchman's face was blank. It was neither having the eyes, nose, mouth, nothing, even no eyebrows. And that's when the wind blew and the lamp out. And at this very moment, the wind blew and the lamp was extinguished. So, children, the story ends at a mysterious point. The writer has left it on the imagination of the story what might have happened to Mr. Oliver. Clear? Or again the reader can guess whether they are the really the ghost, or it was just the figmentation of Mr. Oliver's imagination, or he was coming in the dark, or because of his he was all alone bachelor, so because of his imaginations he might have seen that face, or it might be some of the boy of the school who's playing that prank to Mr. Oliver. The writer has left all these things onto the reader's imagination, right? So revise the story carefully. If you have any problem, you may ask, and the questions I'll send you in WhatsApp. Go through those questions. Thank you.